Hello friends. By the end of this video, I'm very sure you will be well versed with the concept called decorator in Python as well as Django. Because Django comes up with few inbuilt decorators like login required, permission required, required HTTP methods or CSRF exempted. These decorators are very important in any real life application. But honestly speaking, the concept of decorator is not straightforward. Well, there are a few twists and turns. So for that reason, I decided to come up with this concept in as simple as possible. So for that reason, I have written over here three different programs, and gradually this concept will be crystal clear. Let's start with the very first program. As you can see over here, I've created one function by the name called outer, and that function will be called right from this line. So x equals to outer brace and brace close. So what do you expect? Well, the control when it comes over here will give a call to this particular function. That's what the thing is. Yeah, very good. But there is a twist in the story. That is, over here I have given a call to another function called inner. Yes, that means outer function. Within the body of the outer function there is another function called inner, and here I'm printing a statement. Okay, now over here you have to be very careful. Let me put forward the thing once again. When the control comes at this particular point of time, the control will go to this particular function called outer, and inside the outer function we have got one more function, but that function is not yet been called. Hence these two statements are not going to be executed. Please pay attention over here. Once the control comes to the outer function, the body of this outer function has got another function inside, but this tool line or this particular function will not get called until and unless somebody calls the inner function. Nobody has called the inner function yet. So these two lines will not be executed, rather the return statement of the outer function, and that is basically returning the inner function. So this particular statement will now get executed. So it is returning the reference of the inner function, and that inner function is now going to be assigned to the variable x. Yes, you rightly heard. That is, x is going to hold the reference of the inner function. That means I can say that the outer function is returning another function. Can I say this? Yes, it is true. The outer function is returning another function. That is a very important point. Along with that, the variable x is going to hold a function. Or I can say in this way that we are assigning the inner function to the variable x. So variable x is now representing this inner function. Henceforth, I will be calling x with the help of braces, because x is not a variable this time. X is a reference to the inner function, and once I call this, then only the inner function has been invoked, and thereafter this particular statement get executed. Okay, that's how the execution will be going on. So even though I'm calling this function at the beginning, but this line will not get executed. This function will not get executed. As a proof, I can show you. Let me write over here a print statement. So I'm writing a print statement over here, like whatever statement, calling an inner function. Yeah, this is very good enough. That's fine. So that means when I will run this particular program, I will be seeing this particular statement first, and thereafter I'm giving a call to the inner statement, inner function, and then only I will be able to see the following line. So let's go and check it out. So Python, the file name is called decorator.py. I hit the enter. As I said, this line will be executed first. Look over here, the line got executed, calling inner function, and then we called x brace and brace close, meaning I'm calling this particular function, and thereafter this line getting executed. So by the end of this video, by the end of this particular program, we can conclude these two lines, that a function can return another function, isn't it? The outer function returning the inner function. So this line is true. Similarly, I can also say I can assign a function to a variable, and that's what happened in this line. So we're assigning a function to a variable. So that got proved after the end of this particular program. Okay, I hope these two lines are now clear to you all. These two understanding will help you gradually to get into the core part of the decorator. We are still not working with the decorator, but we are moving gradually toward the topic called decorator. So understanding these 2 points is very crucial. Okay, let me comment this piece of code, and now let's go and uncomment this function. This is another function which will take you to one more step ahead toward the actual decorator. Let's see what we have got in this function. Well, we have got two functions over here, add number, and another function called check decorator. Now look at this two lines very carefully. You might be wondering, over here I've got two variable a comma b. Yes, these are two variables, but what about this? Is this a variable? Well, I've given the keyword, sorry, it's not a keyword, I've just given a word called fun. In fact, it's just a variable name. You can try out with some other variable. It doesn't matter what name you're putting over here, because it's simply a parameter. By whatever name you want, you can put it over here. It doesn't matter. Now, how exactly is going to work? Well, when the compiler will be, well, Python is not a compiler, Python is interpreter based, but when the interpreter will be interpreting these two lines, they will just go through this line and nothing big deal happens unless and until this line is encountered. Now look over here what I'm doing. Well, I'm giving a call to the function called check decorator, and I'm passing as an argument a reference to a function. Well, this is a new line that's getting added, isn't it? Pass a function as an argument to another function. Previously what we saw, a function returning another function and a function being assigned to a variable. These two lines we have seen. But over here we are seeing something new. Here we are introduced with another statement, that is, we are passing a function as an argument to another function, and that's quite interesting. So when I'm writing this piece of code, what happens? Let me explore you one by one. So the control comes over here, and this parameter is going to hold the reference of this function, and that is called add num. And already the function has been defined over here, isn't it? Yes. So this will get stored inside this variable called fun. And as I said, just like this inner function, the wrapper function will not get executed because nobody has given a call to the wrapper yet. So the control is going to return, this particular statement is going to return the reference of the wrapper function. And this reference is now getting stored inside this variable called add num, just like the way it happened in case of x. So I would say that once you have given a call to this statement, the check decorator getting called over here, as an argument, the name of the function getting stored over here, but the wrapper function will not be getting executed. Rather, it will return the reference of the wrapper function, and that reference will get stored inside this variable called add num. Okay, I hope it's clear. Now you might be wondering, who did give the call to this particular function? Yes, and that brings us to the next line, add num. Although I'm writing over here add num, but add num is actually not the name now. Rather, add num is holding the reference of the wrapper function, and the wrapper function takes two arguments. For that reason, add num is passing two arguments, 16 and 14, and that will be assigned to a and b respectively. So keep it in mind that when you're giving a call to the add num function, well, add num is not a function, it's a variable, but behind the scene the wrapper function is getting called, and you're assigning this to value right over here. So that's the time when the wrapper function got executed. That's the time when the wrapper function got called. And now when it got called, it is going to evaluate whether a and b both are divisible. In case if they are divisible, now what it's going to do is going to return. So what it's going to return? The content of this variable. Well, already we have passed the reference of add num function, so the content of this variable is right over here, and that is called add num. So at this particular juncture, now we are giving a call to the add num function, and we are passing the respective value 16 and 14 to the variable a comma b, and the sum of these two numbers are now getting assigned right over here, And since you're returning that, that return value is getting stored in the result, and thereafter the result gets printed. That's how the flow is taking place. Let me just do a small recap of what I said. The time when I'm calling this, the control will come right over here, and then I'm passing this function reference to this particular parameter called func. So func is just a variable name which is working as a parameter. You can give whatever name you feel like, it won't matter. Now often the student get confused that after entering the body of this particular function you encounter another function over here, and you might be thinking that this function will get executed. In fact, it won't, because nobody called this function. Hence, this entire body will not get executed. Rather, the control will come to the return statement, because the return is associated with this particular function. Hence, it will come right over here and is going to return the wrapper reference. And this reference is now getting stored inside the variable called addNum. So addNum is going to refer to the wrapper function. So once you are calling the wrapper function, since it got stored inside addNum, so you're writing brace on brace close and you're passing these two parameters 16 and 14 respectively. Well, 16 will be assigned to the variable a and 14 is going to be assigned to the variable b, and that's how the body of the wrapper function will now get executed. The control is going to come over here, and since these two numbers are divisible by 2, hence the body of the if condition will get executed. And here you are giving a call to the func. Remember, the func was holding the reference of this particular function called addNum. So if you notice over here, a very interesting thing is taking place. The func variable is actually not mentioned within wrapper, rather it is mentioned outside. So that means the inner function is trying to access a reference that has been mentioned outside. And one more thing, when you're giving a call to the addNum, which is basically holding the reference of wrapper, that means you are calling the wrapper, which is the inner function. In spite of that, it is accessing a reference that has been mentioned outside. So the inner is trying to access a reference that has been mentioned outside, and check decorator is not called at this line. When you're calling this, you're basically calling the wrapper. So the wrapper is accessing a reference that has been mentioned by the outer function, and that is still valid. And this is where the new term that will come in picture, that is called closure. So let's read this command line. The wrapper function, remember the func a comma b, and that's what I'm saying because this is present, which was actually been mentioned outside. So the wrapper function remembers function a comma b as addNum that was stated outside the wrapper function, and this is what called closure. So closure is like a reference of a resource when a function is trying to use that has been actually mentioned outside. Okay, so the inner function is giving a call to a reference to something that was mentioned outside, and that's where the concept closure comes in picture. So this line is very crucial. Okay, so here you're giving a call to the wrapper and you assign the respective parameters, and after the evaluating, it is going to give a call to the outer variable which is holding the reference of this particular function, and then it is going to call this addNum and it will pass the respective value, and addNum will now do the summation and it will pass the reference right over here, which eventually will be returned, and that will be stored inside the result over here, and thereafter it gets printed. Okay, so let's run the code and let's see what output we are getting. Okay, so let me run the code now, and that brings to the result is 30 exactly, because 16 plus 14 would be 30. So after the end of this particular function of this particular program, what fact did we find? Let's go through all these 4 lines. Pass a function as an argument to another function. Yes, I'm passing that. Look at this line here. I'm passing an argument, which is basically a function. So pass a function as an argument to another function, who is the receiver over here, is also a function. So you're passing a parameter which is actually a function, and the parameter goes to another function, right? You're returning a function from another function. Yeah, we are returning a function over here, because if you see the wrapper is a function. That function is been returned, and that has been stored inside the variable addSum. So other way around to speak, we are assigning a function to a variable. Yes, exactly. So when we have all these 3 properties, well, previously we saw these 2 properties in this particular function, but now we have got one extra property. That means you're passing a function as an argument to another function. So when these three properties club up together, we can say that Python provide first class citizen functions. So function in Python is considered to be a first class citizen. Okay, and this whole concept you will also find in my JavaScript video. Well, JavaScript also comes with the same concept that's called first class citizen. JavaScript functions are also first class citizen. So whatever you are learning over here, the very similar concept you will also come across JavaScript. So you can relate this thing to JavaScript as well. So in JavaScript, we also call the function to be a first class citizen, like what you saw right over here. Well, this entire program, what I have shown you, does not make use of the decorator, but has implemented the concept of decorator very much strongly. And now we can move to the third and the last function, where we will actually use the concept of decorator, and for that we will be using @ symbol. So @ symbol is actually giving a birth to the new concept that is called decorator. And I already said that Django comes up with a lot of inbuilt decorators. So for that reason, this particular function or this particular entire video is very important, because many times in interview this question has been asked, tell me how decorator work, or what is decorator and its whereabout. So let's see how this particular system, the decorator which has been created over here, is actually working. And in reference to this, whatever I have said above, all these things will be very effective. So as we saw over here, def check decorator was there, here also same thing. So this concept is very much the same, nothing new I have added over here. So check decorator is a function which has got a parameter, and I'm expecting that this parameter is going to hold another function. And inside this check decorator, I've given a call to another function, but initially this function will not be called because nobody is calling wrapper, and it's going to return the reference of the wrapper function. Okay. So when the control will come and execute this piece of code at the beginning, because Python will follow top-down approach, so for that reason the control will execute, will go through this particular statement, but nothing will get executed until and unless the control comes right over here. So when the control comes over here, one might think that the decorator will get called immediately. I mean, @ check decorator, you're giving a call to this particular function. You might think that it will be called immediately. No, it won't call immediately. Just like the way we saw over here, let me uncomment this line for clarity purpose. Okay, just like the way you saw, it is giving a call, but before that it also has got a function as a parameter. So it will not execute immediately, rather the control will explode this to line as well, and thereafter it will find that there is a function called addNum that I need to pass it. Behind the scene this is going to happen. So that means this piece of code is exactly just like this, very much like this. Okay, or better to say very much like this particular function. Although we are giving a call to the decorator over here, but this, it will not call immediately, rather it will scan this to statement, and thereby it has understood that this decorator need to call this particular function called addNum as parameter. So that means after the execution of this piece of code, it would very much be like this. Okay, but still it will wait until I give a call to this very line, because now we are going to align this. So that means once the control has gone through this piece of code, it knows very well that the check decorator will be accompanied by a parameter, and that is a function, just like the way we have done over here. So check decorator is now going to pass this addNum right over here as a function. So this parameter is going to hold the reference of addNum, and the control will enter, but at that point of time this wrapper function is not been called yet, hence it will return the wrapper function, and that return statement will be again assigned to this particular function itself, just like the way we did it over here. See, over here the reference of this particular wrapper was been assigned. So if I uncomment this piece of code now for clarity, so we saw that this wrapper information was been assigned to addNum. So that means when we call this particular line, this at that point of time this wrapper did not get executed. In fact, this reference of the wrapper got stored over here. This will be called only when I will uncomment this line now, only when we call this, then the wrapper function is getting called. Same thing over here. So this statement, this entire statement is what is happening behind the hood at this particular line. So the reference actually got stored inside the add number. So add number is now working like a variable, and eventually it is working like a function because inside this wrapper has been assigned. So when I call this particular statement, when I execute this particular statement, you're calling the wrapper function now. So wrapper will now pass, that means add num is actually represented wrapper. So 16 will go to A and 14 will go to B. Well, let's change the value over here. Let's make it 20 so that we can find the difference. The previous result was 30. So this number will be assigned to A comma B, and then we will see yes, they are divisible. And thereafter what I'm doing is that I'm giving a call to this particular parameter. Remember the closure, you're calling the outer parameter from the inner, and when you are giving this call at that point of time, you're not working with the decorator, rather you're giving a call to the wrapper directly. So that means when you're calling this particular statement, or when you're executing this particular statement, you're calling this parameter which is referring to the function which I have defined over here. So this function is now been passed right over here, and that means A will come to, A will be passed to A and B will be passed to B, and it will do the summation. So 20 plus 14 will be added over here, and that will bring 34, which will assign the result over here. Well, I could have written this thing right over here also, just to show you that I just broke the thing into two lines. So finally the 34 is getting stored over here, and that will be returned back to this result, and eventually it will be printed over here. So remember one thing, @check decorator is basically working just like the way we have seen over here. Here we are giving a call to the outer function which is passing the function as a parameter, and eventually the wrapper will be returned and that get assigned over here, and then we are giving a call to the wrapper. So this very statement will be represented by the help of this @check decorator, and finally when we are giving a call to add number, we are calling the wrapper, we are doing the result, we are doing the calculation, and this is a statement that gives a call to the closure, and finally the result comes back, and that result gets stored over here, and eventually we will see the output. I hope the thing is now clear. I know it might take some time to understand, but I tried my level best by splitting the entire concept decorator into 3 different programs so that you know how exactly the decorator is going to work. So let's run the code now, and we'll see 34. Hence we understood that add number is giving a call to the wrapper, and eventually the wrapper is giving a call to this particular function right over here with the help of the closure, and we did the summation, and that has been returned over here, and we finally got the result. So that's how the decorator is working. And remember, in the interview they might ask you the question what is decorator, or they might even ask you the question what is closer, or even they might ask you the question that what do you mean by function as first class citizen in Python. Well, all these questions will have the same answer. You have to explain these 4 lines. That means we are passing a function as a parameter to another function. We can return a function from another function. We can assign a function to a variable, and we can also make use of closure, whereby the inner function is accessing the resource of the outer function, even though the scope of the outer function is no longer used, because the time when you're calling the wrapper over here, at that point of time you're not calling the decorator anymore, but still is working. It remember the reference of the outer parameter, that is still remembered by the inner function, and that's what the closure property is. So all these things together is what the topic of decorator is all about. So I hope this video will be helpful to make you understand how Django and Python works in context to decorator. Okay, so that's all from this video presentation. See you soon. Bye bye.